everyone, welcome to Automatic Reviews. I am Mark, and this is the long version of the SBGR317 review, and it's going to live up to its name. It's pretty long. There is a short version. I'm going to tell you, if you're one of those people who watches my videos and thinks, oh, they're too long, I just want him to cut to the chase, I do that more so in the short version. It's still not super short because I'm trying to do reviews, not overviews. I'm not just going to tell you what the specs are of the watch. You can just look those up and read them for yourself. I'm trying to give you a little bit of perspective on what it's like to own and wear the watch, what's involved with maintenance and all the rest of that. So the short version is a short version. It's not super short, but it is considerably shorter than this video, which goes into a lot more depth. So you have both options. If you feel like, that this video might be a little much for you, given its runtime, then check out the short version. I'm posting them simultaneously. Okay, so let's get to the review. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the specs. This watch measures 40 millimeters diagonally. It is 42.2 millimeters, including the crown. Lug to lug, it's 46 millimeters. And lug to lug, factoring in the overhang of the end links, it is 48 millimeters. The watch is a substantial 13.2 millimeters thick, and it weighs 144 grams on the bracelet adjusted to my 7-inch wrist. The detailed crown features a raised logo, and it is screw down, and it measures 5.8 millimeters in diameter. Between the lugs, it is approximately 19 millimeters and is not compatible with many off-the-shelf straps. The case is made from stainless steel and features a mixture of brushed and polished surfaces, including polishing of the famous Zaratsu variety, which is just basically a mirror, a super distortion-free mirror polish.
It also features drilled lugs for quick strap changes.
Covering the perfectly smooth pitch black lacquered dial outfitted with incredibly detailed yet also remarkably simple baton markers is a very slightly double-domed sapphire crystal with AR coating applied only on the inside.
In very direct, very bright light, the dial reveals a fine sunburst effect, which almost appears matte.
In normal lighting conditions, it appears wet like a little pool of black ink. And if you've seen like the SARX035 dial or similar dials, then you sort of get the picture. The dial also features an applied Grand Seiko GS logo and high quality printed text, as well as a chapter ring. It also features a date window that is nicely framed, and it does have a quick set date function. This unit comes on a stainless steel bracelet that features 5-piece links with a mixture of brushing and polishing. It does come with half links and no microadjust, and it features a firm milled push button clasp that has the logo with a mixture of brush polish and sort of a textured blast on the interior of the little frame here. So it's quite detailed and very nice. The bracelet is adjusted using these small, very tiny slotted 1.5 millimeter screws, and there's a bar inside which holds the link in place, and I'll show you that now. It looks like this. Look how tiny that screw is. Here's my finger for reference. So they're very little tiny screws, but they're very well made and they do function very competently. There doesn't appear to be any Loctite, so they just fit by friction, and they do stay in place. Inside the case there, beating away with a 28,800 BPH, is a 9S65 automatic movement, handcrafted with hand-selected MEMS manufactured parts. They use sort of computer engineering to make these parts super accurately. Other industries use these type of techniques as well, and it creates more consistent pieces. And then they're hand-selected by a master watchmaker. It is decorated with a variation of sort of a Geneva stripe style, but with sort of Grand Seiko's own twist. Like, it doesn't look quite the same, but it is also in a stripe type of style. It's quite beautiful. It catches the light uniquely. That's what I would say. It kind of throws off a bit of a rainbow. I guess so does a Geneva stripe, but anyway, it's quite nice. It features 35 jewels and was adjusted to 6 positions and 3 temperatures, also by a master watchmaker. And the results are astonishing. In over 3 weeks of a mixture of wear, rest, and winder, the watch was running at less than 1 second fast, which is just incredible. I will say that if you keep it very weund, meaning you wear it constantly, and then if you're not wearing it, it's on the winder, so that it's very at the top of its power reserve, it will gain more time. We're at something like 5 weeks with this watch since I've set it, and it is now running just under 15 seconds fast. So it will gain, but I mean 15 seconds over 5 weeks is ridiculous for a mechanical watch of any kind. But that being said, it will gain time faster if it's at the top of this power reserve. And you can see that there's some sort of a etching or it looks like mechanical etching of GS Grand Seiko, and then the 35 jewels adjusted 6 positions, and then it has the name of the movement there. It is a very, very nice to look at movement. And of course you can see there's etching around the edge here, and then there's this sort of segmented, it's almost like a knurling of a sort, and that's decorative and it looks quite nice. And it has a sapphire case back that you're looking through, but it's interesting, it's very, very difficult to film. There you can slightly see it here. It also has a Grand Seiko lion logo, the circle there, etched into the sapphire itself, which is something that you almost can't see under normal lighting conditions, and so it doesn't actually negatively impact the view of the movement, but it is kind of this neat feature that it's there. It's kind of a hidden feature. The watch features a very useful 72-hour power reserve, and I believe that is in part due to the Sprawn mainspring. There's also a Sprawn hairspring, and that is a proprietary alloy made by Grand Seiko. It is very elastic and very durable, and it allows them to get more durability, more longevity, and more accuracy out of the watch, as well as I believe that they have credited it with giving them the ability to produce a longer lasting power reserve. So that is very cool. It also features hacking and hand winding. The watch is water resistant to a very reasonable 100 meters, and is part of what helps this watch achieve a true GATA status, which is that, go anywhere, do anything sort of mythical watch that almost no one can seem to agree on, and that's because it's different for everybody. It does come with a 3-year manufacturer warranty, and a service is recommended to be done at a 3-year interval, and it's reasonably priced at about, I think, 400 USD, about 500 Canadian. But the Zaratsu repolishing of the whole piece requires it being sent back to Japan, and is quite costly, in the neighborhood of, I believe, something like $800 US if you had the whole watch done. But I think the case itself is something like $300 or $400, which is expensive, but it's a testament to how time-consuming this is. Whether or not you would actually send it back for that purpose, I have a feeling it's one of those things. Some people are going to do that because they want it to be absolutely perfect, but for others, every mark is just part of their experience with the watch. So I think a lot of people don't even have to consider the expense of the repolishing. That's really, really subjective. The packaging is basic, but reasonably pleasant. It's got this cardboard outer shell. It has the famous rice paper insert to help you, with gloves on, it doesn't operate that easily, but it helps you, pull the inner box out. It has the documents. This is really cool, this sort of owner card here, and the manual and everything. And then inside this box, there's this vinyl covered padded inner box with sort of satin pillows, satin lining. It's reasonably well made, but it doesn't match the quality of the watch. I'll go on about that a little bit more later. The entire watch is made in Japan, and that's from the case, that is from the crystal. They grow their own sapphire crystals, the movement. Every single thing is produced in-house by Seiko in Japan, specifically here in Grand Seiko, which is a separate division now of that company. So they are producing all their parts themselves. Even the box, I don't think it was made by Seiko, but it was made in Japan as well, which is kind of rare. Usually, though, at least the box will be imported, but they went for a full sort of super Japan-centric watch, which, I don't think is necessarily important, but I think it's cool. I think there's plenty of watches made with imported parts that are very, very good quality, and I don't have any issue with it. But I do think it is kind of neat when you have this company saying, this is our vision, and from start to finish, we're going to make everything ourselves. And that's what you have here. Pricing is about $5,700 Canadian, or about $4,100 US, and that's about 3,300 pounds, or about 3,700 euros. But that's just a direct conversion of the numbers. I'm not really sure what these retail for in those markets, but that gives you a rough approximation. I'm just going to get a wrist shot out of the way quickly, because everyone always wants that, and they're always like, where's the wrist shot? So this is what it looks like on my 7-inch wrist. And yeah, I think it fits really nicely at 40 millimeters. I think it's a very versatile size, and it'll fit a lot of a variety of wrist sizes. talk briefly about the lows on this watch. It's going to be very brief because there aren't very many. Most things about this watch that are in any way questionable are what I would call probably more mids because they're somewhat subjective. I think sort of objectively this watch needs a micro adjust or could benefit from a micro adjust, and that's kind of the elephant in the room here. It is difficult to dial in a perfect fit on this watch that will fit under all sort of heat and sweat conditions. When you adjust it for a perfect fit, it will be too loose when you're just kind of wearing it around in air conditioning or on a cooler day. And since it's adjusted with screws, it's a little time consuming to fix that. And I would say that qualifies as a low. I also want to talk a little bit about this screw down crown. I do love that it is screw down. It gives you that extra water resistance. But I do think that the crown itself is sort of strange. You don't have to pull it out very often because the watch is so accurate. But on most screw down crowns I've ever used, you unscrew them and then it sort of pops and then you pull it out and you operate it. This one I find you unscrew it completely and it feels like it's completely unscrewed. But if you just go to pull it out, it feels like, you might catch your nail on the threading, or there's something about, pulling it out. So I find the system that I've sort of implemented, and it does work, I guess, basically perfectly, but I think it's odd that it has to work this way, is I keep unscrewing it. I unscrew it, and then I pull and unscrew, and then I feel like it just kind of comes out. And then I feel like you sort of have to do that. Once you get that, that'll bring you, the first position will bring you to the date quick change. If you turn it clockwise, you're going to get the date flipping. But if you turn it counterclockwise a little bit as you pull out to the next sort of stage, which is the time setting position, I think that helps it pull out more smoothly. It's an eccentricity. I don't think it's a big deal, but I'm going to call it a low because I don't see why it is this way. It just seems as though this should just be really, really simple, and it's not, and I can't quite figure out why. I may be missing something. Maybe you guys in the comments are going to be like, correcting me on this, but I do feel like it's a little odd. It does work perfectly when you kind of understand how it works, but I don't understand why it would have to work the way that it does work. So I do think that's a negative. But that is about it for the truly, truly negative things regarding this watch. So let's move on to the mids. Yeah, just to talk a little bit about the box as a potential sort of potential negative. I probably call it more of a mid because I don't think it really affects your enjoyment of the watch in any real practical way other than in its sort of keepsake status. And then perhaps for just if you're really, really picky, because it's not to the standard of the watch. It is made with materials which I think will degrade over time. Vinyl tends to crack or become sticky. The interior is not entirely durable. It's okay. I think that they've done this to sort of present the watch nicely, but to not spend a ton of money on the box for something that most people just put aside or put the extra links in. But I think one of the consequences of that is that this is a watch that will last generations and generations. This is a box that probably will not. I think if they had done some kind of beautiful, but simple Japanese wooden box, it probably wouldn't have been a lot more expensive to produce, but I would have been willing to pay that extra. If the watch had been another $100, but it had come with a box that matched the quality level of the watch itself and was suitable for use in sort of handing this watch down, it would have been worth it. But I can understand how, since most people just toss the box aside, I think that their thinking is, why spend tons of money on it? I can see that both ways. That's kind of why it's a mid. It's not really a distinct negative. It's just, for me, I think it could have been something they might have done differently. I want to talk briefly about the thickness of the watch. It does wear a tad thick at just over 13 millimeters. I don't personally mind that much, so that's why it's a mid for me. But I think for some people, I'm guessing that if they got it down to about 11 and a half even, that not a single person would complain that it wears thick. So I think that that's something they could do. I don't know how difficult that would be. It is a reasonably thick watch. I kind of like a chunkier watch, so yeah, again, for me that's not a negative, but I could see that being a negative for some people. Bracelet play. The bracelets on Seiko are often described as kind of loose, and I don't disagree with that overall appraisal, but I think it misses something, and that is especially true with these high-end pieces of the Grand Seiko line. At best, people credit these bracelets for adding a comfort by being more flexible, and at worst they get called cheap compared to their Swiss competition, which tend to be rigid and firm with very, very tight tolerances. But I think that's what's missed is the bracelet is designed to flex in a sort of slightly conical profile. to move up the wrist as it widens. So what I'm trying to say is that because it has this flex to it, you can see that the bracelet can kind of open up more on one end, the end that's toward the widening part of your forearm. And as a consequence of that, I feel like you can adjust it slightly tighter than you would other watches, and it'll still have the ability to move a little bit up and down your forearm because the watch can flare, essentially, flare open. With a Swiss watch that was adjusted to the same tightness level, the watch would sort of be locked on one part of your wrist. So I think this was an intentional sort of design idea. But for most of us, we're used to sort of the Swiss style, and we adjust it to a looseness level where it can go up onto the wrist bone and then it comes down this way and it kind of stops when it hits a sort of a wider part. So it kind of moves like this back and forth. The way Grand Seiko's bracelets work, it tends to keep going a little bit up the forearm because it will flare. So that's a bit of a mid here because I can't say that this is a bad idea. I just think it's subjective. It depends on how you feel specifically about it. I think I'd be absolutely fine with it if it had a microadjust. So I don't think that, I don't want to ding it for that, but I do want to let people know that I think that's what's going on here. I mean, this is how the bracelet's designed. I think there are a lot of people who say they can't get this bracelet size right. And I think that, that's partly because of the lack of microadjust, but it's also partly because I think that it's a little confusing. The links themselves are 19 millimeters. The half links, as they're called, are actually almost 13 millimeters. So they're more like 2/3 links. So yeah, if you're finding that it's a little too small, and then you add a half link, and then you're like, hey, it's still a little too small. Intuitively, you might think, I'm going to add another half link so to the other side, balance it out. And I think that's a bit of an error because that makes it kind of way too big. It adds another full 12.85 millimeters. If you remove the half link you just added and add one more full link, then you're adding 19 millimeters. So as opposed to adding 26 total millimeters, you're only adding 19 millimeters. So that does give you a little bit of an in-between size that I think some people would benefit from. That being said, there's nothing like a micro adjust. So, I mean, I'm not making excuses, but I do think that I think it's sort of a little counterintuitive if you don't realize what's kind of going on. So there is that. It's not a perfect system, but I do think it's a little bit better than they get credit for. But I also think a bit of a mistake people make with fit on this watch is they don't really understand how the clasp works. I think a lot of people want to center a clasp on their watch. So they want to have this curve or this part here in the middle of their wrist. But as you can see, this is not at all how this clasp is designed. This clasp is designed, look at the shape of this curve, right? It's a sort of a quarter circle, okay? Not quite a circle, but it's designed to be on one half of your wrist. It's designed to be here on your wrist. So if you center it in the middle and then adjust the links, you're never gonna have a comfortable fit on this watch. You have to adjust the links so that that part of the clasp sits here. And so I think that's a little bit different than some watches people are used to as well. So I think that's something to keep in mind. Another mid is the crystal anti-reflective coating is only on one side. This is a mid only because I love photographing and filming watches, and this contributes greatly to the challenging aspect of doing so with a Grand Seiko. In person, it doesn't look like it does on video or in a photo. To the naked eye, this watch is stunningly easy to look at. It's gorgeous. It is amazing. On video or in photos, it is a frustration. It is very, very difficult to capture. And I would say that is partly due to the fact that it has these AR coating only on one side, so it doesn't have that, that effect. Even on lower end Seikos, something like the SBGR317 has an anti-reflective coating on both sides, and it's almost like the crystal's not there at all. The reason why they've chosen to do this is because of longevity. I think that the idea here is that if you put an anti-reflective coating on the outside of the crystal, yes, it's going to photograph and film better, and it's going to be a little easier to look at in person, but it affects mostly filming. Then what's going to happen is the anti-reflective coating itself will become damaged on the outside, and then the crystal's going to have to be replaced. So it's going to create a need for more servicing and more replacing of original parts. And I think the idea behind it is that if you spend a fifth of the price on what is a very, very, very nice watch, If after 10 years the crystal needs replacing, either you're going to be fine with replacing it or fine with sort of saying, oh, well, that watch gave me 10 years of service. Whereas I think the idea behind this is that, yeah, they want to say, this watch is basically the same watch it was 50 years ago. And I think that's why they chose to do it this way. I say it's a mid because for some people it will frustrate them to no end. But for me, I actually think it's almost a pro because I do want a watch that's durable. It's, kind of a lot of the criticisms of this watch. I think this is where I'll talk about it. The same thing with the microadjust. I think a lot of people think, oh, they made this mistake. No, I think they see a microadjust as a finicky part that probably needs to be replaced over time. They see it as something which makes the watch tackier. They want this watch to be timeless. They want this watch to last, and I think that's the thinking. Does that really pan out? I don't know. That's subjective. It's part of a philosophy you may or may not agree with, but nevertheless, it is a philosophy. And I think the same thing applies to the clasp. Some people criticize the fit of the clasp, right? I'll talk about that briefly. There's a little bit of a space here you can see between the bracelet and the clasp. That's because they don't want this part of the bracelet becoming burnished. It actually never catches on anything. It has no negative effect. I actually don't even think it looks bad. Some people obsess over it. They just simply don't want this watch to have this really worn-in, shiny part right here. That's because they just want this watch to wear well for a really long time. Same thing I think applies to the clasps. All kind of close crookedly, slightly, very slightly. Does that bother me? No, because I understand the reasoning behind it. The clasp mechanism has two sort of pincers. It kind of scissor closes like this on the pin that comes down the middle. And I just believe that they think it's worth it kind of pulling the clasp slightly crooked to keep this really simple, really elegant, really functional design inside the clasp rather than create something that maybe holds it perfectly like this but adds bulk and then maybe adds complication that they don't know how it will last over the long haul. So they've created something that it's a little slightly off, but some people see this, oh what a flaw. Not really. I think it's just they don't care. They say this is the trade-off of having a clasp which is performing for a very long time without any servicing or without any problems. I have heard some people have had some issues with the durability on some of the clasps on the titanium models, but you see that's exactly what we're talking about here. When they built these clasps out of titanium, the titanium performed differently than the stainless steel, and that added an effect where they had durability issues and longevity issues. So whenever you change something, you add potential issues, and I think Grand Seiko is a little bit phobic of that. They don't want to add potential issues, so they try to keep things as traditional as possible, and that's where we see some issues. Another mid, it's a fingerprint magnet. Anti-reflective coatings are generally oleophobic, meaning they repel grease. So this crystal gets greasier than crystals with an AR coating. The watch is highly polished, so those are surfaces which can accumulate fingerprints. It's a mid because, look, shiny things are fingerprint magnets. Beautiful things are usually fingerprint magnets. Almost every very good-looking thing gets described as a fingerprint magnet. Is it worth making this watch less good or less durable or less special so that it accumulates less fingerprints? No, but everyone's going to complain about it anyway, so it's worth a mention, but it's not a super negative thing. Scratches, they will come and they will show. The Sarasu polishing is going to show damage, maybe not more easily, but more tragically than other forms of finishing, especially other polishing, which is not as nice as this. When you scratch this, and you will, it's going to show. It's a mid because, look, all watches get damaged. I do believe it's part of just wearing a watch, enjoying a watch. It ages with you. It shows, the experience of wearing it on its actual surfaces. I think if you get too hung up on it, you're not going to enjoy your watches. You're going to keep them locked away. I've already put a few scratches on it. Be rest assured you can have it repolished. But I would say that the fact that, it's going to scratch is not something that should deter you from wearing it and enjoying it. So that's my personal opinion. I think the 19 millimeter lug is worth a mention. I think that's a frustrating dimension. I think the case could support a 20 millimeter lug width by its appearance. I do think 19 does look quite nice, but then again, what would have been the harm of adding 1 millimeter and making it easier to buy straps for this watch? So yes, odd lug widths always kind of frustrating, and this is no different.
I think finally in the mids, I'm going to say as a social media watch, a lot of the things I've already touched on kind of cover this. It's going to accumulate visible scratches. It's a fingerprint magnet. The AR coating is not that great because it has all these sort of polished, dazzling surfaces. You've got the glossy dial and these polished indices and these polished hands and, you know, all these different, the way it catches the light, very, very difficult to film. And as you accumulate scratches on this, you might not get that perfect Instagram shot, and that might drive some people crazy. I don't think it's the perfect Instagram or YouTube watch for that in that respect. In person, it'll blow you away. But when you're filming it and when you're trying to show it off, I think if that's your deal, then it's sort of more negative thing, and that's why I'm going to put it as a mid here. For me, I do love filming and photographing my watches, but the fact that it looks great in person is more important to me. So I don't really consider it a negative, but some people might. So that is worth mentioning. Let's just talk about some of the great aspects of this watch. This watch has an incredibly timeless design. It is classic, classy. It could be 40 years old. It could be made yesterday. You wouldn't know. And I think that speaks to just a design that is always going to look good and it will look good under a variety of situations. And that kind of brings me to this idea of this GATA watch, this go anywhere, do anything watch. That's what this watch is. That's controversial. People in the comments are probably going to say I'm wrong about that because it's so subjective. But I do think, you could dress this watch up, wear it with a suit, wear it to a formal event. Some people will complain the thickness prevents it from fitting very comfortably under a cuff. But for me, 13 millimeters, I don't know how tight your cuffs are, but it would fit fine for me. And of course, you could wear it with jeans and a t-shirt. You could wear shorts and a t-shirt. You could wear it anywhere, and it's got the water resistance to make it durable, and it is actually just a very durable movement. It has good shock protection. Of course, you wouldn't want to wear it golfing or something like that because of the G-force. You shouldn't wear any automatic watch under those circumstances, but anywhere you could wear an automatic watch, you could wear this one. And because its looks are so universally appealing, and because it's so well made and designed, I think this is very much a candidate for a GATA go anywhere, do anything watch. It's lovingly made, and it absolutely shows. This watch has been made with care. It is not perfect. There are little, like on the counterbalance on the seconds hand, and the very, very bright lighting with a loop, you can see there's a little bit of maybe just slight a polishing artifact, or maybe the way it was manipulated, the hand of the watchmaker. Okay, guys, I'm just going to stop the video here for a second because I did want to do a little sort of breakout video within the video to discuss the idea of quality control at Grand Seiko. As I was editing this video, I started seeing more information out there, particularly from an Instagram user called Haro Mario Bro. I'm going to post a link to his Instagram here. He was talking about how all his Grand Seikos have hand flaws that are similar to the one that I just showed you. He has 5 Grand Seikos, and every Grand Seiko I looked at in the store, which was maybe 6 or 7 of them under a loop, all had some kind of minor hand flaws when viewed with a loop under magnification. So I did feel like this would be worth talking a little more in depth about to give a sort of perspective. It's sort of a fact that most, if not all, Grand Seikos under magnification, when viewed under the right lighting, do appear to have sort of, some flaws. And this does going to run contrary to the reputation Grand Seikos have for having impeccable quality. But I actually don't think that it does. It's kind of like looking at a painting by like a grand master, and you say, but if you put really bright light on it and you view it under, magnification, you can see that that's not really fur. There you can see all the little brush strokes that make up the fur of the animal. Well, that's not how it's designed to be viewed. And Grand Seikos viewed under normal light with no magnification do appear to be perfect. I think that's kind of their magic. Yeah, of course, you can, if you look at anything under enough magnification, you can find flaws in it. The flaw in the counterbalance of the seconds hand, that was filmed at 10x magnification with a macro lens, and under 2x magnification through my phone's camera. So kind of a 20x. I'm not an expert on optics, but I will say that you really do have to create conditions under which you can view these flaws. I was shining an extremely bright LED flashlight very close to the watch, angling it just so under all that magnification in order to reveal these flaws. I had to add this section in because I didn't want this whole review to be about these flaws, but I also just didn't want to skip over the subject and pretend that it didn't exist, because I think that wouldn't be informing you as a potential consumer if you're going to, go to the store and maybe pick one of these up. I didn't want you to think, you know what? I was lied to. I was told these are perfect. And it's like, I think that's sort of the bad narrative. This narrative about Grand Seikos being perfect. I think that's kind of wrong. They're perfect for something that was made artisanally. That's like a handcraft. Like if your friend was to whittle you something out of wood and it was beautiful, you'd say it's perfect. But it's not literally perfect. It's just, it's perfect. A lot of air quotes today, but it is. It's just, that's kind of what Grand Seikos are. They're something that is just so gorgeous that you call them perfect. But, of course, you can find flaws if you look hard enough. And another thing I think is worth mentioning, most high-end manufacturers, a lot of them charging a lot more money for their watches, also have flaws that are visible under magnification, under the right lighting. And they're not shooting anywhere near as high as Grand Seiko is in terms of what they're trying to achieve here with the fine detail of their watches. A lot of them just kind of slap paint on. They paint the front face of the hands, but not the sides of the hands. You can see the dripping paint and all that. And these are watches that cost twice what this watch costs. So, if you're just being fair, it's not really fair to fault them for being human and making things that are imperfect. And it's also not fair if you're comparing them to their competition. I just don't want Grand Seiko's reputation for perfection to kind of taint people's understanding of what, is reasonable to expect. Okay, that is it. That is the entire breakout section. I know this was a little bit long, but I think it was worth it. Let's get back to the review. The MEMS process, I talked about it a little bit earlier when we were talking about specs, but the parts in this watch, while they're hand selected and hand assembled by a master, they are initially made by a very, very controlled computer process, which really, really makes these parts with incredible accuracy. The processes that they've invested into at Grand Seiko are paying off. I'll talk a little bit about the fact that it is regulated by a watchmaker. This watch wasn't just regulated by a watch factory employee. An actual watchmaker adjusts this watch and monitors this watch and makes sure that it functions as well as possible. And I think that's an incredible fact about Grand Seiko watches. They are made entirely by master watchmakers. Nothing is handed off to somebody who has less expertise, and it really shows. I do want to talk a little bit about the Zaratsu polishing. Let's see if I can get the angle just right. Okay, here. Okay. So I'm using this piece of cardboard that came with the watch box that I've been using lately, and I can do a review on that for you guys if you'd like. Just let me know. It's quite well priced, and I'm enjoying it. But you can just see the incredible quality of the mirror polishing on this watch, as it just reflects like an actual mirror. It's like I'm taking a little hand mirror and holding it up against this text. That's how incredible the Zaratsu polishing is. People will talk about it, and you'll think, "Oh, how good could it really be?" No, it is better than you've heard. It's gorgeous to look at, and it really, really makes an impression. So their Zaratsu polishing is an absolute high for me. I really, really like the way that it looks, and I really think that it adds to the beauty of the watch, and also just this overall sense of incredible quality that the watch exudes. The hands are like almost like blades. They're like, the second hand is rounded. The actual a minute and hour hand are almost look sharp, like you could take them out and perform an operation with them, like little scalpels. And the indices themselves are also just produced to such a high quality level. And one of the consequences of that is it's incredibly legible in low lights. I could have said that a negative was, or a potential negative, like a mid, was that it didn't have lume. But I actually think under most low lighting situations, this watch is more legible than watches with lume, especially because often the lume isn't charged when you need it to be. So yeah, you can't charge this watch up with your flashlight if you're going to go into a very, very dark environment. But for most use case scenarios, you're not doing that. You're looking at your watch in a dim hallway, and yeah, this watch, because of all these polished surfaces and because of the inclusion of the brushing, they've really accommodated every situation, and it's extraordinarily legible. It's my most legible watch, actually, in low light. So I think the lume thing's been overblown by some people. I'm gonna actually go as far as saying it's a pro. It's a high, as opposed to even being a mid. Another high for me is the display case back. I love a display case back, especially when the movement is this gorgeous. And so for me, that is a definite high. I love being able to look at what's going on inside the case. And yeah, this is a looker, so it definitely adds to the value of the watch for me. I just want to talk about a little bit of the amazing value for money. Geez, in its segment, you're not going to get anything close to this level of quality for this money. I mean, this is not a cheap watch by any means, but the way this, in the quality of the movement, the fact that it has been handmade and hand regulated and hand finished, and the level of the polishing and just the overall quality that it exudes, you will not touch that for anywhere less than maybe 3 times the price of this watch. I put this watch next to a Datejust, and man, this watch is just much, much nicer for about half the price as far as the finishing is concerned, under a loop. And does a loop matter? No, under practice it doesn't, but it does enable you to kind of get I always say a loop lets you see things more quickly that you're going to notice eventually anyway. So if you're going to go watch shopping, bring a loop with you if the store that you're buying at doesn't have one. So, but I do think that this watch is an absolute incredible value for money, and it is, it is to get to my next point, a multi-generational piece. Your descendants will want to wear this watch, will want to have this watch because it's special and it's super high quality, and the fact that it is, like, I'm not going to say only, 6,000 roughly Canadian dollars. I mean, that's a lot of money, but it is a very, very special watch for that money. That brings me to the name, Grand Seiko. I love that this is a super, super high-end watch you can wear anywhere, and then people aren't going to be like, oh, what's that, Rolex? Like, I don't particularly like wearing watches with recognizable brands, recognizable to non-watch people, that is. I don't like talking about my watches with people who don't understand watches. I don't want to sound like a snob, but it's just a matter of, if I'm going to have a conversation about my watch, I want it to be with somebody who has a passion for watches, so we can have sort of a substantive conversation. I don't want to just have a conversation with someone who's going to be like, whoa, how much was that? Oh, that's so expensive. I mean, again, I'm not trying to be a snob, but I think if you're a watch person, you're going to know what I mean. And I think that this Grand Seiko has that about it in absolutely to the max. This is a watch, if you wear it around, even though it's very nice and people are going to notice it's beautiful, but most people, if they see Grand Seiko, they're going to be like, oh, some kind of Seiko, that's pretty snazzy, they might say, or something. But if you meet another watch person, they're going to be like, oh, cool, that's Grand Seiko. And I like that. I like that it's got that subtle kind of watch code thing going for it. And that is, to me, a definite high. It's overall just an all-time classic. This is what you'd kind of call, a lot of people call, a perfect watch. It just does everything. It looks gorgeous. It keeps wonderful time. It's a great value. That's kind of one of my concluding elements here. This watch is nearly perfect. I mean, it does have some flaws. I have described them. But wow, if it isn't just a fantastic, fantastic watch. Okay, so my conclusions about the SBGR317. Should you buy this watch? Of course, as with everything, it's completely subjective. If this watch speaks to you, if you're in the market for a very high quality luxury timepiece with an amazing movement and incredible craftsmanship, if you want something that's different than what a lot of people out there are wearing, if you want something with the sort of the watch geek kind of cool factor, this watch has that in spades. And what it also has is it has, as I mentioned in the review, it is a watch that you're going to keep. You're going to give it to your kids. They're going to give it to their kids. This is a really, really fine timepiece. And if that's what you're looking for, and if you like the way this watch looks, and you want something reliable, that keeps excellent time, that is just, that's beautiful, and that's made with a lot of care and sort of loving craftsmanship, this might be the watch for you. And hopefully this video has helped you make your decision. And if you are watching the short version of the video, if you feel like you need more information, there is a long version of the video as well. And if you are watching the long version of the video, then you've already seen all that extra information, and hopefully that was helpful to you. I'm making the one conclusion for both videos. It's just a time saver for me. But anyways, guys, I hope that you enjoyed the video, and I do encourage you to check out my other videos, and maybe there's some information in there that could be helpful to you as well. So thanks for watching. Bye.